This is the Spiritual Exercises of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, written by Saint Ignatius Loyola, translated by Elder Mullen, narrated by Don Gentry. First Week, Principle and Foundation. Man is created to praise, reverence, and serve God our Lord, and by this means to save his soul. And the other things on the face of the earth are created for man, and that they may help him in prosecuting the end for which he is created. From this it follows that man is to use them as much as they help him on to his end, and ought to rid himself of them so far as they hinder him as to it. For this it is necessary to make ourselves indifferent to all created things in all that is allowed to the choice of our free will, and is not prohibited to it, so that, on our part, we want not health rather than sickness, riches rather than poverty, honor rather than dishonor, long rather than short life, and so in all the rest, desiring and choosing only what is most conducive for us to the end for which we are created. Particular and daily examine. It contains in it 3 times, and 2 to examine oneself. The first time is in the morning, immediately on rising, when one ought to propose to guard himself with diligence against that particular sin or defect which he wants to correct and amend. The second time is after dinner, when one is to ask of God our Lord what one wants, namely, grace to remember how many times he has fallen into that particular sin or defect, and to amend himself in the future. Then let him make the first examen, asking account of his soul of that particular thing proposed, which he wants to correct and amend. Let him go over hour by hour, or period by period, commencing at the hour he rose, and continuing up to the hour and instant of the present examen. And let him make in the first line of the G as many dots as were the times he has fallen into that particular sin or defect. Then let him resolve anew to amend himself up to the second examen which he will make. The third time. After supper the second examen will be made, in the same way, hour by hour, commencing at the first examen and continuing up to the present, second one, and let him make in the second line of the same G as many dots as were the times he has fallen into that particular sin or defect. 4 additions follow to rid oneself sooner of that particular sin or defect. First addition. The first addition is that each time one falls into that particular sin or defect, let him put his hand on his breast, grieving for having fallen, which can be done even in the presence of many without their perceiving what he is doing. Second addition. The second. As the first line of the G means the first examen, and the second line the second examen, let him look at night if there is amendment from the first line to the second, that is, from the first examen to the second. Third addition. The third. To compare the second day with the first, that is, the 2 examens of the present day with the other 2 examens of the previous day, and see if he has amended himself from one day to the other. Fourth addition. The fourth addition, to compare one week with another and see if he has amended himself in the present week over the week past. Note. It is to be noted that the first, large G, which follows means the Sunday, the second, smaller, the Monday, the third, the Tuesday, and so on. Here are printed 6 G's, indicating days of the week. General examen of conscience to purify oneself and to make one's confession better. I presuppose that there are 3 kinds of thought in me, that is, one my own, which springs from my mere liberty and will, and 2 others which come from without, one from the good spirit and the other from the bad. Thought. There are 2 ways of meriting in the bad thought which comes from without, namely, first way, a thought of committing a mortal sin, which thought I resist immediately and it remains conquered. Second way. The second way of meriting is, when that same bad thought comes to me and I resist it, and it returns to me again and again, and I always resist until it is conquered. This second way is more meritorious than the first. A venial sin is committed when the same thought comes of sinning mortally and one gives ear to it, making some little delay or receiving some sensual pleasure, or when there is some negligence in rejecting such thought. There are 2 ways of sinning mortally. First way. The first is when one gives consent to the bad thought to act afterwards as he has consented, or to put it in act if he could. Second way. The second way of sinning mortally is when that sin is put in act. This is a greater sin for 3 reasons.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?